Hi, I'm Michael King, and I teach Pilates. I've been teaching Pilates for 46 years this year, so quite a long time. And people always ask me, what's your favorite reformer? Well, there are many companies out there making reformers today, and they're very different. Sometimes the springs are different, sometimes they're metal, they're wood, there's different choices. But personally, I would say whatever it is in front of me is my favorite reformer. And today I'm lucky, I love Alpha Pilates. I had Alpha Pilates in my studio here in Glyfada in Athens, and I was very happy with it. But really, a good Pilates teacher should be able to teach on any reformer. So you might have your favorite, but really, if you go into a studio that didn't have your favorite, you quickly learn how to work on any reformer. But I personally think the Alpha system, the Cadillac, the tower, the wall unit, everything we had in our original studio, I was very happy with. And it's a great tool, and they really listen to what the teachers are looking for, and also really what's best for you as a new teacher if you're opening a studio or if you're expanding your studios. So I strongly recommend Alpha Pilates. Now, when I'm explaining the reformer to a client, especially a new client that's coming for the first time, I always like to show them the reformer moving, and I talk about this as being a breathing machine. That it's your breath that moves the machine. So with beginners, normally we breathe out to go away, and we breathe in to come back. And again, breathing out and breathing in. Now, at some point of the training, as they become better, we would change that breath to be breathing in to go back, but it's a lot more effort to breathe in and keep the center connected, whereas with beginners, it's much easier to breathe out and pushing out. So that's the first thing I like to talk about with the reformer. So I really get the concept of breath coming into the method quite early on. Now at the bottom of the springs, your springs are what give you resistance. There's no fixed science to this, because obviously what changes is the height of the client, the condition of the client, and sometimes if they're working with any kind of knee problems or anything. So I always talk about light springs, medium springs, or heavy springs. But really, for one client, a red spring and a yellow spring might be quite light, whereas another client, a red spring and a yellow spring might be quite heavy. So when I give guidance to this, I always say that 50% of the work should be the springs, and 50% of the work should be you. So if you feel when you've got your springs on, you've got too many springs on and it's pushing you back, then you're working with too much tension. It's difficult because, again, in fitness, we think the stronger we get, the more springs we work. But really in Pilates, it's the opposite. The better you get in Pilates, the less springs. I always like to, again, make that point, especially a new client who's come from a fitness background. You know, if I had €1 for every time a client said, I want more springs, I want more springs, and I have to explain, I can put all the springs on, but you're not going to be able to move. This is a center training machine. Pilates is a full method. And so really when we're laying on here and we start with the foot series, if you have too many springs, all the work's going to go into the legs and you're not going to get the work where it's supposed to be. So we have to be clear that maybe 2 red springs or 1 red, 1 blue might be a good spring to work with for some clients. And again, as I say, what you change is obviously the height and the condition of the client. So the springs are like the colors of your paintboard. You know, brushes, when you see painters' brushes, all the brushes are the same, but then what the painters create sometimes are very different. And that's really what your springs offer. Now, we have this foot bar. The foot bar, again, the higher the foot bar, the easier. The lower the foot bar, when you're laying on the reformer, the more challenging it is, because your feet are more underneath you. So as you push away, it's going to be a lot more challenging. So when you're laying on the foot series, which is our first exercises, I would say start with a comfortable height that you feel that you can maintain the trunk stability as you're pushing away. Today we have some very nice foot bars. In the original reformer, this was made out of wood. So it wasn't the same kind of nice softness that we have today. At the top of the reformer, we have our risers. Now the risers are new to Pilates, because in the classical Pilates, these were attached down below. And actually these were very different. In the classical Pilates, these were leather straps. which recently I was just working on a classical machine and I found it quite awkward because I got quite used to the nice ropes. These ropes are very friendly, shall we say, where the leather straps are quite hard. Now again, it's a little bit like the foot bar. The higher the ropes, the easier. The lower the ropes, the more difficult. So we want to make sure that, again, if you're going to be working with a beginner or a client less able, that you start with the ropes quite high. Of course, the shoulder pads play a part in it. When I'm laying on the back with a client, I don't let them touch the shoulder pads. I like to keep the distance away. That way then they're not using the tension which many of us carry in our upper body to do the exercise. And of course the headrest. The correct position for the headrest is down. Because what we're doing here is we're training people to have good posture. So if the headrest is up, you're pushing the head forward. Now, of course, clients are going to love the headrest up because as soon as the headrest goes forward, you're going to relax the neck muscles. But really, as I say, if you've got a client that is quite flexed, maybe they need the headrest up, and you can tell from their eyes when they're laying down, if the eyes are back, they need their headrest up. So this is my introduction to the Reformer. It's a great tool, but it's only one of the pieces of the whole Pilates system. So this is your mat converter. And as I say, with the mat converter, if you get a Reformer, get this, because it opens a whole new world to programming. Remember, Joseph Pilates invented his Reformer to train you to do the mat better. So if you've got this, you can do all or many of the mat work exercises on top of the mat converter. And that opens up a whole new possibility to programming. You could do mat Reformer classes, where you're combining the two things. You could start with it, or you could just do a mat class and just use the mat converter. I think it's important. People often think they're going to get quicker results from doing the Reformer, but really the reality is things are easy on the Reformer, where if you put the same movements on here, suddenly the body has to work a lot more. So absolutely, in my opinion, get the mat converter. I want to talk about the two platforms from Alpha Pilates. These are great because you've got a wider platform to stand on and you've got a narrower platform to stand on. Now, narrow is great for some of the standing exercises if you're working in parallel. In fact, in the traditional classical Reformer, we didn't have a platform. At the end here was just a very narrow strip that you had to stand on. So even just having this is a little bit of luxury for doing some standing work on the Reformer. But the magic is also, that really only works when you're working parallel. If you've got the wider platform here, then it gives you more options for working with rotation. So when you're standing on the Reformer, this is a lot better when you're doing the rotation exercises. So again, these two pieces of equipment or apparatus that come with the Reformer, think of them as giving you extra tools. The Reformer in itself is fantastic, but then as soon as you add these, like the mat converter, it opens up a whole new world to doing different types of exercises. This is your box. Now, when it's this way, we call this the short box. When it's this way, we call it the long box. Now, with Alpha Pilates, it's a great box because you've got a nice height. With some other companies, the boxes tend to be quite low, which is not a problem if you're laying on it. But the benefit of having a taller box is really when you're sitting on it with your legs to the side, you've got a better position, especially if you've got some clients that are quite tall. Now the jump board, again, another piece of apparatus that goes with the Reformer. Now jumping is quite interesting because it was originally done, not with a platform like this, but it was originally done with a foot bar. And it was for dancers who had had injuries, either ankle or knee. Before they went back to their dance, they were practicing jumping very gently onto the Reformer. So it was originally, as I say, a post-rehab type of exercise to get the dancers ready. Now I see many programs today calling their classes called cardio lattes or cardio pumping or jumping classes, which is great, it's a lot of fun. But we have to remember, to be beneficial, you have to keep doing at least 10 minutes of jumping, which is quite hard when you're laying on a reformer. It's not impossible, but again, I would try and always use lighter springs, because if you've got too heavier springs, you're never going to be able to keep jumping for 10 minutes. So my personal favorite spring is a blue spring. Again, yellow tends to be a little bit light. It doesn't give you enough resistance coming back. But as soon as you go above a blue spring, you're going to limit the length of time that you're going to be able to maintain that jumping. So as I say, it's not wrong, it's not dangerous, it's fun. But to be beneficial and to be effective, make sure you're doing at least 10 minutes of jumping.